Hello and welcome to this episode of Shatterdice Reviews. And today's board game review is
Vengeance, a board game for 1 to 4 players by Mighty Boards. The game does say 2 to 4 players on the box, but it includes a solo variant in the rules, so it can be played with just 1 player. In the game of Vengeance, players will compete against each other to see who can gain the most points by taking revenge against the low-life gangsters who have attacked them. Each player takes on the role of a vigilante, wronged at the start of the game by the various gangs around the city. The characters available to choose from range from an aging punk rocker to a Middle Eastern florist. Each character has a unique set of skills and attributes to help them in their quest for vengeance. The 3 main attributes in the game are mind, skill, and health. Each one serves as a kind of health bar that can have damage cubes placed on them, referred to as stress, broken, and hurt, respectively. The more of these types of damage you take, the more cubes you will place on the matching track. This affects the number of dice you will roll, and if any one of these bars is completely filled, you are knocked out. The skill and upgrades along the bottom of the character mat are usually some form of dice mitigation, allowing you to substitute the symbols on your combat dice for different symbols, such as converting a move symbol to a melee attack symbol. These skills aren't really what make the characters unique. Instead, it's their attribute bars that really make the difference, as some characters may have more skill or more mind than others, allowing them to excel in different areas of the game. You probably won't notice how much of a difference this makes until you've played a few games, but once you have that experience, you will see how different these characters can be. At the start of the game, as well as picking your character, you will need to set up 6 gang dens, the shop and victory points boards, and the turn tracker, as well as having any card decks and tokens set out nearby. So, the game is about vengeance. How does that work? Well, it begins with the wronging. This is essentially the game setup, and if this game were a revenge movie, where it clearly takes its inspiration from, the wronging would be that opening scene where the hero gets beaten and battered in a home invasion, or something like that. The game represents this by using a card draft. After setting up the components and selecting a character, players will then take it in turns to draft vengeance cards. These cards will each depict a gangster and what type of damage they have inflicted upon you, such as giving you a bad trip or a bashing. This means before you even begin play, your character board will be covered in damage cubes. There is a clever balance to be struck here with which type of cards you choose to draft. Do you spread out the damage across your attributes, or pile it all into one area with the hope of healing it later? As well as the damage, it's important to pay attention to which of these horrible thugs did this to you, as the gangster named and depicted here are the targets of your vengeance. When you take down one of these gangsters who wronged you, referred to by the game as a boss, you will score points, and the more that boss has wronged you, the more points you will score. This means when you draft those vengeance cards, if you can draft multiple copies of the same vengeance card with a matching boss, you can score more. But beware, having all of your vengeance focused on one target will mean you are relying on finding that one target, essentially putting all your eggs in one basket. After drafting all your vengeance cards and distributing damage cubes onto your attributes accordingly, you will move on to the montage phase. Where the wronging used card drafting, the montage uses dice drafting. Each character rolls a number of the white montage dice as indicated by the highest visible number on their mind track. These dice are then pooled with all the other players. The players then take it in turns, selecting a die from the available pool. This continues until all the dice have been collected. The symbols on the dice represent speed, healing, upgrade, recon, and lastly, a wild, which can be used as any symbol. Each of these results do a different thing during the montage phase. Speed is the most simple. The player with the most speed will go first in the combat phase. Healing allows you to remove damage tokens. Upgrade allows you to buy upgrades such as abilities and items from the shop board. And finally, Recon allows you to perform reconnaissance on the gang dens. There is an additional step to the montage phase where you will use these montage cards to increase the number of heals, upgrades and recons you have access to. But I will leave that for you to discover if you decide this game is one you want to check out. Right now, we will take a closer look at the recon you can do during the montage, as this is quite important to your quest for vengeance. For each recon result you have from the draft, you gain one of these tokens. You may then place each token you have on any gang den of your choice. This allows you to secretly look at the boss card placed on that gang den, letting you know whether the boss at this den is one of those who have wronged you. This way you will know which den you want to attack during the combat phase. The more recon you do, the better the chances you have of finding your targets, but be careful. Putting all your resources into recon will prevent you from healing or buying those all-important upgrades. The montage phase is that part of the revenge movie where the hero is recovering from a beating, training and getting stronger, hiding out with a pair of binoculars as they watch the bad guys going in and out of their warehouse or dive bar, or wherever they like to hang out and make their bad guy plans. Then finally the hero goes in to get their revenge and take out the trash. And that is what happens in the combat phase. Now, with all that montaging done, we move on to the combat phase. The player who had the highest speed result in the montage phase goes first. Let's say that's you, and it is now your turn. The first thing you do is pick a den to attack. Hopefully your recon turned up some good results and you know where the target is. If not, you're going to have to guess. You can still score points from a den if the target boss isn't there, but it requires you clearing all enemies from the den. Not easy. Place your Vigilante's miniature on the start space of the den and place the various type of colour-coded thugs on the indicated spaces of the den. There are 4 kinds of thugs. Green tough guys, who have 2 health, blue gunmen, who can hit you from adjacent zones, yellow blockers, who prevent you from moving past them, and grunts, who must be targeted first by any of your ranged attacks. Then, reveal the boss card and place the matching boss miniature on the indicated boss space along with any bonus henchmen they might have. Now it's time to get your revenge. You have 3 rounds to make it to the boss and take them down before you have to flee. If you do really well, you might be able to take out everyone in this hive of scum and villainy and score yourself some bonus points. So, how do you take these bad guys out? Collect a number of the red combat dice equal to the highest number visible on your skill track. If this number has the green pistol or X icon in the corner, you will also roll the green bonus die. Roll your combat dice and then decide how to distribute your results. Each machete represents a point of melee damage. Pistols allow you to assign a point of ranged damage. The running man allows you to move 1 space through the den. And finally, the hooded face means all enemies will attack you if they are in your space or have range to you. There is quite a lot of nuance to the dice rolling and mitigation in this game, through the use of abilities and equipment. I'm not going to go into it here as I could talk about it forever, but suffice to say, your aim is to move through the den towards the boss and defeat as many of these thugs as possible. You will have to spend each die carefully to get the most efficient result and reach the boss. You get 3 rounds of dice rolling before you have to flee, and as you flee, any thugs you have to move through on your way out will damage you, so carving a clear path to the boss is important. If you manage to defeat the boss, you will score points based on how many vengeance cards you have depicting that boss. If you have 1 card depicting the boss, you will score this top number. 2 cards, you will score the middle number, and if you have more than 2 cards, you will score the bottom number listed here. And that's the basics of combat. After all players have resolved a combat, you will progress the turn tracker onto the next montage phase, but now there is a difference. After the montage, each player will perform 2 combat phases before doing 1 final montage and 2 more combat rounds, and then that's it. End the game, tally up the scores, and determine the winner. So that's basically it. Now let's take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good. Vengeance leans heavily on its theme, and it does it well. The game really gives me this feeling of playing through some gritty 80s B-movie full of revenge and over-the-top violence. If you like those sorts of movies too, you might well find this game puts a smile on your face. Going beyond theme though, the frantic dice rolling makes the combat feel fast-paced and action-packed, especially if you use the sand timer included with the game to add more pressure to the combat phase. There are also a lot of ways to mitigate dice rolls and choices to be made with all the drafting, which really adds to the strategy and tension of the game. I think it's a good system with a lot going for it. The bad. Player interaction is quite limited, where the biggest impact other players have on your turn is if they swoop in and defeat the gang boss you are going after. Otherwise, it feels a bit like you are all playing solo at the same table. The game can also be very frustrating when every gang den you visit does not have a boss you are looking for, but by varying your vengeance cards, it's not often you run into this problem. If you are not using the sand timer, which I recommend doing once you are familiar with the rules, the game can also have its pace dragged right down between player turns, as players will try to maximise the effects of their combat rolls and can spend what feels like forever agonising over each result as they decide where to assign it and what abilities to use. The sand timer puts an end to this by forcing them to make fast decisions. The ugly. I'm not sure if it's just me, but I always found the card drafting system at the start to be a bit messy. Every time I play this game I have to check the rulebook to remind myself how to do it properly. It works really well as a story building device, and it does its job perfectly as a game mechanic. I just find it a bit confusing. Maybe I'm not very good at card drafting, I don't know. The game also feels really violent. Lots of games are combat heavy like Descent, Mansions of Madness, Shadows of Brimstone to name a few, but this is the first game I've played where it feels really visceral, with vengeance cards having names like Molar Bore or Nail Through the Hand. It feels a lot more real than slaying dragons and genociding goblins. Personally, as an edgy 90s boy, I love this stuff, but you might not, and if not, then you might want to give this game a miss. So where do I stand on this game? It's great fun, and the solo mode is really good too. For me it's a big win, and I often find myself wishing I could get it to the table more. I love the theme and that speedy, frantic combat that just sucks me into this revenge action movie set out on the table. Oh, and it has a phase called the montage phase. How can anyone not like a board game montage?
Well, I'm bored of reviewing this game now. Bye.